Hey Dennis. Hey Crystal. Hey Kathy.
Hey,
Let me go
hey,
ahead
Francisco.
and let me change my name as well, because my name is not Nicholas. How's everyone doing today?
I'm doing great.
Hey. One second. One second. All right, welcome back to another edition of Weekly Coaching. Nick will be joining us soon. He's just wrapping up with another call. But in the meantime, as always, we can go ahead and just check in with everyone. Thank you everyone for being here as well. I know last week we went over some market research, so I'm kind of curious to see if anyone found some markets that they could tap into, get some deals rolling in, start calling some leads. We could dive into your questions more in detail today. Let me go ahead and get everyone inside. Nick is going to be joining us as you see here. Sweet. Hey, what's up, Nick? Okay, his audio is connected. Hey, Jeff. Thank you for joining us.
Mm-mm-mm.
Okay, I think it's still on. So, did anyone find any new markets to get into after last week's call? For those of you who are joining us that was on last week's call.
Yes, I found a couple new markets in Texas, one of them being El Paso. So I was surprised about that one.
Oh, sweet. Okay, and you're out in Texas too, right, Randy?
Yes, I'm in Dallas.
Ooh, okay.
Mhm.
Why El Paso caught you by surprise?
I don't know. I El Paso didn't come across my desk in a minute just with new constructions. I didn't really hear nothing about new El Paso, but I heard a lot about Austin. So El
Oh,
Paso was just, a surprising one for me.
nice. Okay. Sweet. Well, hopefully you can start calling, texting, getting some leads in there, getting some deals going. Super, super pumped for you. And I think the good thing is about finding markets, especially if you can find markets where not everyone else is in or most of the competition is probably overlooking. Um, that's kind of like a good way to kind of get in front of the wave. So that is excellent. Okay. So as always, you guys, if you guys have any questions, you can either unmute yourself or put it in the chat. And then when Nick comes back on, we can go ahead and start answering some more questions, but we could just pop it off, have a quick open discussion, see if you guys have any pressing questions that you guys are currently working on in your business this week. And that way we can get some answers for you. Okay, let's see here. Does anyone have any pressing questions that they're working on this week or anything that they're currently working on?
I got one.
Sweet. What's up, Dennis?
Um, when so I've been doing the phone call on the first round of the lead,
Mm-hmm.
getting to know the discovery phase.
Nice.
The follow-up is offer on paper and email.
Okay.
Is that the right approach, or
Yeah. Yeah, I think that's a good approach.
doing it
I
on
always,
paper?
yeah, on paper, because especially nowadays, if you reach out to sellers that may not be as tech savvy or may not be, know their way around the computer. I've been in situations where I've done deals where I had to send a notary out to them so they
Hmm.
can sign the paperwork, get everything situated, and then the notary can send it back to you the same day. Especially if they have an iPhone. iPhones have a feature where you can scan documents and turn them into PDFs. and then you could just email them out. So one of the things that I use to kind of like ease the seller's mind sometimes is just say like, hey, not to worry if you're not computer savvy and you prefer paper, I can just arrange for a notary to head out to you.
Yeah.
They can show you line by line the paperwork, sign it, and then they can send it back, and you don't have to. You could be completely hands off, and they can make sure they send everything back to me so I could get the paperwork started.
All right. And what if we're like way off on price? Does it matter?
Ooh, it just depends on your disposition strategy. My general rule of thumb, and this is just Francisco's approach, is if we're more than $10,000 to $15,000 off, that's kind of a strong deep. If there's no this, that's kind of like a strong ask. If there's no real motivation behind them selling to try to go down on price.
Mhm.
If we're less than $10,000, then there's a little bit more wiggle room for me to ask, like, okay, and this is the way that I structure it. If I'm able to do this for you, right? And generally, the incentive to go with us as wholesalers or flippers is paying cash and covering all closing costs. If I'm able to do this for you, what's the best you could do on price? And then just ask from, from that perspective, is that the normal way that I approach it? But in order for that to be effective and work, there has to be some type of underlying motivation for them to actually sell. Another thing that I kind of throw out there is letting them know, like, hey, it looks like we're 7 grand apart, right? I really want to buy this thing. Based on our conversation, it seems like you really want to sell. I would hate for us to get off the phone and not do business with each other just because we're 7 grand apart. Is there any flexibility for us to meet in the middle? Or if I'm able to do this, what's the best that we could do? So kind of like using goodwill as an anchor as opposed to like just haggling them on price, let them know like, hey, I'm trying to make this work.
Yeah.
But if you want to, be realistic and try to do business, we're like super close. Um, and then just letting them know, just like, hey, it doesn't make sense for us not to do business just because we can't agree 7,000 on a $7,000 difference.
Right.
There has to be a way that we can come up with a solution that we can both walk away from this deal being happy.
Yeah. The conversation with land is much different than the houses.
Yeah,
On the houses, I could haggle better. I could use
yeah,
repairs as a way to bring down the price. But when it
right.
comes to land, there's not much,
No,
you know.
yeah.
And
There's,
I'm noticing that they're not giving out the prices up front.
mm-hmm,
They want me to give them the price.
yeah,
I noticed that a lot with land.
yep. What I want, I don't think he's on today's call, but what I really wanted is one of our clients, he has a lot of leads, but he can't just get to them all. One of the things that I want to do, and we can probably set this up hopefully sometime in the near future, is to do live seller calls,
Yeah.
right? So that way you can kind of see how to kind of do discovery and how to kind of like set up a situation where, because my thought process is essentially, and I just thought about this earlier, cold calling, if you think about it, is virtual door knocking. So what we kind of have to do, and when we're cold calling, especially when we're receiving leads, is we have to learn how to kind of switch the dynamic. And the dynamic that I'm referring to is, how like you go to the mall and then someone's coming up to you and saying like, hey, I got shoe cleaner, or I got perfume, or and that's not what you came there for. You almost have to switch and see like, hey, I know I came to you, but I came to you to see if you had any interest. If you don't have any
Yeah.
interest, I could just get off the phone. Because
Yeah, I kind of force the number out of them or else I don't give them an offer.
yeah,
I kind of put it on them. I'm like, listen, when you bought the property, you got a number, right?
yeah,
Like, yeah. I'm like, well, can you give me that convenience as well?
yeah. I never went to Walmart and didn't see a price tag on something. So,
Exactly.
you know. And I think
That's
one
it.
of those things that they're fishing for, like offers,
Exactly.
they're trying to like hardball and say, "Oh, you give me a
Yeah.
number." I will flat out say this is like, "Hey, Mr. Seller, it sounds from my experience, and I've been doing this for a long time. If you don't have a number in mind right now, it definitely sounds like you're fishing for the highest offer."
Yeah.
And I have no way to guarantee that I will be the highest and best, but I
Right.
can reassure you that I can execute. because I can come on this phone. I don't want to blow smoke up your, you know what, and tell you I could give you $1 million for your property. So I may not be the highest and best, but I definitely can reassure you through my actions and through our interactions that I'll probably be the most reliable.
Mhm.
But based on my experience and talking to thousands of people, normally when they don't have a price, it's because they're looking for the highest and best offer. They're looking
Yep.
for someone to say, "Hey, I'll give you 200,000." If that's the approach that you're taking, Mr. and Mrs. Seller, you might be on a never-ending cycle, because what number would be good enough for you? Even if I did hit your asking price, if somebody came along and offered you $1,000 more, are you going to go with them because they gave you $1,000 more bucks?
Yeah.
It's a never-ending game if you don't have a price point in mind. So it's one of those things where it's like, hey, I could tell you the number that I'm looking to give you, but I can only give you a number if you've already made a decision to want to part ways with this property. If you haven't made that decision wholeheartedly, I don't think I'm the guy to give you an offer right now.
Well, and then the other piece too is if they don't have, there's two ways to do it, right? One way is to negotiate. Two is to inspire them. So like we've spoken about before, it's like, well, what's something you're wanting to do? I don't have a price in mind. Well, great. Well, this is the difference of houses versus land. Land is a house. I live here. If I sell this, I have to go live somewhere else, right? Something has to change in my life in a big way. For land, I actually can sell that piece of land and buy a motorcycle. The fuck do I care? I wasn't living on that land. So I think the other aspect is to fish around for their desires in their life. Well, what's something you've been wanting to do this year? I have in my training, I have something say like, what's next after you, I don't know what I want for the piece of land. Well, great. So, well, after you were to sell this, what would be next for you? Right? That question, oh, well, I'd probably buy a multifamily. Oh, well, I want to get a motorcycle. Oh, well, I want to check out the truck. So sometimes if they really don't have an offer, it's because they aren't inspired enough on what they want to do with it, right? So feel free to get, hey, well, what's next? I mean, a trip to Europe, that's about $15,000. And then before you know it, you can help create their offer, right? And so, and for me too, that would work really well for me because I get really excited about what's next. I've got a car right now I'm selling for $20,000. It's worth 35. I don't give a fuck. Get this fucking thing out of my life. Okay. But it's like, what's next for me? Is it going to be my next car? Am I going to remodel the house? Right. I'm so excited about what I'm going to do with that $20,000 once I get it. So anyways, that's just another strategy. I do think that Francisco is right, especially if they are trying to hardball you and you're deeper into the conversation. But I think if you're newer to the conversation and they don't have an offer, I would then try to work them through that exercise prior. Rock and roll. How's everyone doing today? Sorry, I'm late. All right, so who's up next? Who'd you stop on, Francisco? He's got his phone blowing up over there. I don't know if he can hear me.
Dennis had the last question, sorry.
Oh, cool. Dennis, are you clear on that? Do you have any
Yeah.
follow-up questions?
No, I'm good. We're good with that. We're just, just trying to transition the conversation from homes to land.
Yeah.
And those little distinctions, make a big point.
Yeah. No, and I think I accidentally brought up a good point of, you're not living on this land. So if I was to buy it for you, what would you want to do? You know, you almost turn into like a travel agent. Where would we go?
Yeah.
You know? Let's get creative, get them excited. I'll tell you, that's actually probably a great first stop because like I said, you could even say things like I said, hey, it's not like you live there, right? So you wouldn't have to, if you sold your home, you'd have to go buy another home. In this case, you're basically going to have discretionary income here. What's on your bucket list would be a really fun question. And that's important too. That's almost like a rapport builder, right? So even if you were to ask them what's next or what's on their bucket list, whenever they seem confused, think about how much you're going to learn about that person too. Even if they give you a good answer or a bad one, you're still going to know what makes them tick, right? In a sense, oh, it's my granddaughter. She's my world right now. She's everything to me. Well, great. Well, was she trying to get in a private school? What's going on with her? But you can start leaning on their priorities.
Would you offer without them giving you a number? Would you still
Yeah.
give an offer?
Yeah, I totally would. I
You
don't
would?
think that for land, the beauty of land is that I don't think I don't think there's a value. So one thing I'll just go into real quick is like houses have Zillow, okay, which means that everybody can Google their address, and not that that price means anything, right? I'm not saying Zillow is God, but it changes their perspective on how much their land is worth or their house is worth. There's no Zillow for houses, so they really can't price check you, so I met this one guy, Corey Thompson. He does mobile homes, and I actually like his strategy. And he says, you know what I do? I do half tax assessed value and see what they say, and he's like, it's real easy for me, and normally tax assessed value is probably half what the property is worth anyways, right? And then half of that. So you might be at 25 to 40% of property value at half tax assessed. So he says, if they don't give me a number, I go half tax assessed value. And I think something like that could be a safe bet because tax assessed is almost guaranteed to be under the property's actual value anyways.
Cool.
And then you know what? Worst case, you get it under contract. One of two things are going to happen. It's a little high, right? You go back to them, you let them know, hey, I fished this around to my contacts. They said, at $3,000 less, we can do it otherwise, blah, blah, blah. Right. So you get a little bit high, you're still in there, right? You get a little bit low and you just make the profit off the top. There is a big, I don't agree with it, but there's a big household wholesaling strategy that's just get it under contract. We'll figure it all out later. Right. Now, I don't super agree with that method, but if you're ever off by a couple of grand or something, there's easier things. It's easy to talk about that stuff. So as long as you're following some type of methodology, you should be pretty good, even if you did have to backpedal a little bit. But I don't think you would. Awesome. Hey, Kathy, I see you.
Hey there.
Hey, welcome.
I've got it on stop video, but that's not showing my face. So I don't know why.
I can see you. I can see
Oh,
you.
okay,
We're
good. I just
Yeah.
can't see me. Along that same lines, Nick, price, where I don't have an issue with them giving me a price. I have an issue with them needing 60, 80, 100K on a 2-acre parcel that I've run comps that are 50 and I've offered them 40.
Yeah.
So it's not just a few grand, it's like almost double in some cases or 1.5 times where I need to get it. So
Right.
in the times that I've stretched, went on and sent them what they asked, it sits, I do the same thing. You just said, I go back to them. My builder said this, my buyer said that, the market told us this, we're too high. Unfortunately, we need to be here. I just got an offer at 30. We're at 60 on your contract, those type of conversations. I guess depending on where you are and what deals you need, or if you're, you know, light on your acquisition side, you know, where
How
do
do you
you,
make it work?
right, how do you,
So this reminds me of like what I would call like the 3 offer strategy, right? And I think that every deal has 3 offers, whether it's houses or land, but we'll talk about land for a second. But the houses has its same world, right? The first one, cash offer, is definitely the lowest.
the quicker
can-
one?
That's right. Yeah, I can pay cash for this. If you want cash, 40,000. Well, I don't want, I need 60,000. Okay, great. You know what? I can do 60,000, but it might take me 3 to 6 months to get that done. So what you do is when they want more, you ask for more time.
Okay,
Okay, 2 reasons. 1, land does go up in value. 2, what you're going to do, I think you already know this strategy, and many of you might, is you're now going to list that on the MLS. Okay, you're going to find a broker fee. You're going to find a brokerage, because now whatever price they want, let's say they want 60, but it's worth 80. Okay, you offer 40 for cash. Okay, they want 80, but they'll take 60. Okay, is a cool way to do it. Okay, great. Well, yeah, I've got 3 to 6 months. Okay, awesome. So now what I'm going to do is I'm going to take over responsibility of this property. I'm going to list it on the MLS, and I'm going to list it for 70. It's worth 80. Okay, I'm going to list it for 70. It's still $10,000 off. That's like 15% off. And now you're on the retail market world. And then you make that $10,000 spread. That's if they are okay with that. Okay. Then so that one we need time. Okay. Then the last strategy is creative financing. And I used to have this mentor, and he would say, I'll pay any price for any property. What matters is the terms. Okay. And at the time, I was really fresh to real estate, and I didn't even know what the hell he was. I'm like, that seems stupid. Why would you do something so stupid? But what he's saying is, hey, I'll pay you $1 million for that home if the payment's $300 a month, right? Because at $300 a month, I could still re-rent it for $1,500 a month, and I can make $1,200 a month for life. So I share that, because whenever the price is too high, the higher the price, we ask for more time. Hey, so, you know, if you want, so just so you know, that is full retail, 80,000. And you didn't want to do the one that takes 3 to 6 months. So here's what I can do at 80,000. I can pay you $5,000 down and then $200 a month until the remaining balance is paid. And this will be, and I'm just throwing out numbers here, so we all know. So one of the students at one of the companies I used to work for, Land Profit Generator with Jack Bosch, I thought this was a cool story. They did buy the land at a little bit close to the higher the value, and it was like close to the bone. But they owner financed it. They only paid $240 a month. And within 2 years, I think the price of the land had like doubled in that area. So even though he'd made a deal that was close to the bone, other than the terms, the market still took care of it, right? The area became more saturated, became more popular. He ended up still making, 100% of his money back as well because of that. So sometimes terms isn't bad. And additionally, that's if you hold on to it. That's terms and hold. You could then terms and sell, and then you sell it to someone else for $350 a month and $5,000 down. Now you make your $500 back, and you make $100 a month profit off of it as well. So that would be my approach. If we're having a good conversation and everything's going right, and the only thing we're not aligned on is price, I think it's a great strategy to realize the higher the price, the more time you need. And I honestly think that there's a way to communicate that logically to the seller, right? Like, hey, that is 100% more than what I wanted to pay. Okay, I'll admit that. I can do that, but I do have to do it under this condition. So here's the two things I could do. And then you could come up with like maybe a couple of offers. I can give you 5,000 down and 200 a month, or I can give you 500 down and 500 a month, right? Maybe you can come up like, what do you need? What would make you, do you want a bigger monthly payment or do you want more cash now? And I think things do start getting a little bit more complex here mathematically. I'm really good at math. I'm not good at negotiations. I'm not good at that stuff. I'm good at math. So when you're good at math, you can sculpt these deals better. But I'd highly recommend checking out someone like Pace Morby. And I'm also working on getting like a creative finance expert in here one week so we could really dive deep on some of the languages that we could use that will help improve everyone. But that would be my answer. And then if they're not down for any of those, they're not ready. To Francisco's point earlier, hey, it doesn't sound like we're ready. You know, I'll go ahead and cancel the contract. But I just want you to know if anything happens or you have any friends, I'm right here. I am full of integrity. That's why I decided to cancel the contract. I don't want to string you along, but you can poise it in all these great customer service style ways.
Yeah, I like that. I like that sentence too. I'm poised with integrity. So that's why I've canceled, because I've done that on a few. I avoided
Right.
them and sent them right over to them and said they weren't comfortable with the remarketing in one case. You know, one guy, after he read it and it said we were allowed to. And I said, great, no problem. I'm glad I know now.
Right. And you know, and to your point, that one fundamental of life, just while we're talking about it, is whenever we do something for somebody, we have to make it sound good. You know, we were doing them a favor. Hey, I'll cancel this contract. My reputation means everything to me. That's a badass little bonus line. You're already canceling the contract. You might as well get whatever goodness you can, you know? And so one little story I'll just share with you guys. When I was a restaurant manager, this is how what I just shared with you, I'll tell you how I figured it out. So when I ran restaurants, we have 30, 40 employees on a shift. And the whole goal is teamwork. You get the food, you get the drinks, I'll get this, I'll run this out for you. But what I realized is people weren't really realizing how good our teamwork was. So this one person would run all this food and help out all these people, but she wouldn't tell anybody. So I created a policy in the restaurant. And it's whenever you do something for somebody else, you have to tell them what you just did. Hey, I just ran your food out to table 42. Hey, I just got your drinks for table 13. And before you knew it, this contagious effect of teamwork started taking over everyone because we were helping each other, but we weren't announcing that we were helping each other. So as a side note, whenever you do anything for anybody, customer, family member, loved one, best friend, let them know what you did for them. Do not do great things in silence. You do not get the positive reputation you deserve, and you miss out on the sacrifice you just made to do whatever you did. You missed out on the true benefit by not truly communicating it. So, and that's amongst the same principle of I canceled the contract because I have high integrity and my reputation means a lot. Awesome. I can't even tell you guys how much I learned from these things. All right, James, I see you're next up on the list. You got any question for us, James? Let me see. I think I got the answers pulled up here in the background too. No questions. All right, my man. All right, and Joy's back for more. Welcome back, Joy.
Yes, I'm back. I'm just listening and just taking more in.
Okay.
I think the one thing I still struggle with, and I continue to struggle with, is just narrowing down where I want to target and market. But that's an internal
Yeah.
thing I'll continue to work on.
Yeah, you know, I would say, not that you asked, but I would say that the real goal of all of our markets is to find the balance of suburban versus saturated. Okay. If it's too saturated, everyone knows the value of their land, right? I just had a guy hire me right outside of Raleigh, North Carolina. Okay. He's got 50 leads. We're only a third into his campaign. He's got 50 leads. Like, he's killing it. Okay. Now, he's like, Nick, all these people, man, they all know what the property's worth. Right, is one thing he was saying. And that is a side effect, a negative side effect of a saturated market. Because if they're being pursued by so many other people, then of course they know the value. Like, if 20 people offered you $100 for your car, and then one person came up and offered 75, you'd be like, hey, I know it's worth at least 150 because all these strangers are lowballing me at 100, right? So that's one of the downsides of a saturated market, is the knowledge that everybody has of the value. So I would say that the main goal is for you to pick a place close enough to a metro area, but far enough to where it's not being pounded by all the locals to buy the land, if that makes sense.
It does.
So
Thank
yeah, it's
you.
almost like a scale. Yeah, no, absolutely. And good luck. And I would also, I'll tell you real quick the areas I would stay away from. And are you doing land or houses? Real quick.
I started with houses, and I'm kind of branching into land, but
Okay.
yeah.
So I'll tell you real quick the 3 kinds of areas I would stay away from when picking a market. Okay. The first one is any place with any type of global attraction. Okay, what's global attraction? Disney World. It's a perfect example. Everyone knows about Disney World. As a result, I think even I remember when I worked at the IHOP out there, so many Asian people, so much influence comes in from all over the nation. At the IHOP I ran, like, no one would speak English at the tables. Okay. And so I would stay away from anything with global attraction because that's too attractive. That means that everyone else is hunting there. Another fun fact about places like Disney World, I used to run a lot of restaurants. I didn't own them, I managed them. And all the restaurants around Disney, in both Disney Worlds, California and Florida, all of them are the #1 restaurants in the nation for that food chain. So the IHOP I ran out there was a #1 IHOP in the nation just because Disney is close by. So sometimes the attraction is so great, it starts to work as a detriment because now every other business wants to buy land too, not just investor, every commercial, everyone wants that land. So that's the first thing I would stay away from, is anything with too much notoriety. The next thing I would stay away from would be land that has like a high recreational use. So like, I had a guy hire me in Pennsylvania, and it was the first land campaign I've ever seen totally bomb. And I was like, wow, I've never seen a land campaign do bad before as far as lead flow goes. And come to find out after talking to him, it was very highly sought after hunting land. Okay. Well, some of these people that own land for recreational use, they don't care if they use it once every 3 years. They just want to own it, right? Maybe their friends come in town and their friends use it and they share it and all this other stuff. So that's the other thing I would keep an eye for, is stay away from stuff that's known for fishing or hunting or anything like that. And then the third type of place I would stay away from is I'm losing my voice, my apologies, is any place in between 2 saturated markets. So like, I'll use where I live, for example. I grew up in a little town called Lakeland, Florida. All right. Lakeland is literally directly in between Tampa and Orlando. Right. Well, naturally, Tampa and Orlando have been huge cities for 50 years. So for the past 50 years, people are trying to scoop up a lot of this land in between it. And now even more than ever, because Tampa's bigger than ever, Orlando's bigger than ever. So they're kind of swallowing that up. So for example, anything in between Tampa and Orlando, I would also not do. But that goes for anywhere where there's 2 really big saturated markets. And I would not pick the place in the middle, would just be another advice on market selection. But awesome. All right. Next up, we have Randy Mayo. Randy, do you have any questions for us?
No questions. I'm just soaking everything in. That was a good one. In between two saturated markets and then also the global attraction. I never heard that before. So thank you for
Well,
that.
You're welcome. No, and it's unique, but it's because I see the leads, right? And I have this amazing experience because I actually meet with my clients, and I think a lot of people, like I had a guy call me earlier and say, Nick, you know why I'm going to hire you? Because you're the only person that's ever talked about saturated markets to me. He's like, every other coach I've ever spoken to is like, no, 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 it's possible. It's possible in Miami. It's possible out there. And I thought that was really cool for him to say that because, I, as a lead generator, I know this doesn't work certain places. And because I speak to all my clients, I want to bring those nuggets back to everyone. I don't want to like keep that to myself in a sense. But no, cool. Thank you. Thank you, Randy. And thanks for joining us today.
Yes. Well, then just piggybacking off of that, since you said it and we're here talking about the markets, when do you think it's best to grab attention towards a market on the uprise? I hear different things about, being the first one to know. What are some key points that you've seen or figured out that, okay, this market is on the uprise. Let me look out for these things, or this is what I'm seeing to let me jump on it before everybody else, before it becomes saturated.
Right. No, and I think that's a great question. And I have strategies. So like, I do have an answer for your question. I'll share it real quick. Everything is just a strategy, right? It's not a surefire way always. But I think of when I was a kid, again, back to Lakeland. Lakeland, when I grew up there, had more cows than people. Lakeland had more cows than people back in the day. And it was super rural. Now, if you go there, there's no cows, there's all people. It's super crazy. Okay. So it's definitely growing. So what I say to do, how do we find these up and coming markets? Well, one is I would find maybe a secondary market that's actually doing pretty good. Okay. Let's use Lakeland, for example. It's outside of Orlando and it's doing pretty good. Now, Lakeland itself, too saturated in my opinion, but we already know Tampa and Orlando are coming to swallow up those cities. Lakeland's growing. So what I recommend to my clients is that they find the cities with the worst reputation around the areas with a good reputation. Okay. Because the word is gentrification, if you really think about it. But we all know that the little crappy areas over time are undoubtedly going to be getting swallowed up by the bigger, more predominant ones. A lot of these places, if there's not skyscrapers now, they're not coming, which means they have to go wide. So I would recommend finding a secondary market that's doing pretty well and then finding the closest, shittiest market next to that secondary market. Because you can almost guarantee, and the thing that happens to, just to explain the logic is, if this city is growing and this area is like really, I don't even want to use the word poor, because where I grew up, the neighboring city, the word wouldn't be poor, but it was dirty. It was dusty. Like as soon as you crossed over, it's like there's like tumbleweeds, like nothing's painted. There's like no trees, right? It just didn't look very appealing overall. But that land is the cheapest land, if you really think about it. And not by land, I mean land or houses, because it is undesirable. So naturally, when developers are like, where are we going to grow? They want to also buy the cheapest shit and make it nice, right? They don't always want to find the super luxury stuff and make it more luxury. So that would be my advice on how to pick those markets. Maybe find a secondary market and then find the secondary market to that market. I think would be a great place to start.
Thank you so much. That was good. That was good. Thank you.
Yeah, you're welcome. You're welcome. Yeah, and I'm making all this up as I go. I'm just using my own experience, just so you guys know. And I think a lot of it is really more logic based, right? Or mathematical based, and then like mixed with some of my experience as well. All right, awesome. Chantel Lawrence, you got anything for us today?
Hi, good afternoon.
Hey.
Hey, I'm just trying to take the leap and try out the land arena.
Okay.
And you have some great packages I see. So I was thinking about trying that out versus the homes.
Yeah.
So just, any encouragement or advice on that? I'm in the Illinois area, by the way, Chicago.
Okay. So off the top of my head is I would be looking for those secondary markets around Chicago, right? Land itself in a city starts to look a lot like houses, right? Because when you're in a city and there's not a lot of land, there's also not a lot of houses. So you can so there's like the perk of land is not a lot of people pursue it. But if we pursue land in a saturated area, it's going to look like houses again. So that would just be my one piece of advice is look for that secondary market, maybe like we were just chatting about, and start there. And that would be number one. Number two with land is, try not to buy into what other people say. I spoke to a client earlier and he's been gone from land investing for a couple of years and he's coming back and he's like, man, Nick, he's got this is the guy with 50 leads again. Man, Nick, it's just not, I talked to these guys over here. They said it's getting real hard. I talked to this guy. He's saying you got to spend $50,000 to close deals. And I was like, what? I said, I have people closing deals every week with my $1,000 packages. And so when you ask about any advice is, I would be weary of the naysayers. I would be weary of the people that tell you how hard this is. I would be weary of those things. One of my favorite books is called Mind to Matter. It's very boring, but it's really good. And what it talks about is how our mind creates the world around us, right? How the world around us is literally in our mind. It's how we see things. And one of the coolest things they brought up was the guy who wrote the book. It's a true story. He was famous for painting faces. Okay. It was his thing. And one day he says he's at an expo and this woman runs up to him and goes, "Oh my God, I can't believe you paint faces. Faces are the hardest thing to paint. That's crazy. They're so hard." And he's like, they're not, no one ever told me they were hard. Faces are easy for me to paint. Right. And so what happens is sometimes we bump into people and they have an ideology set in their head. And then they want to come to us and share us that ideology. Well, the first person who ever did anything, they didn't see it as hard or impossible. So we have to be weary sometimes of people coming up and spreading that negativity butter all over us, if you will. And I think that that's really important too, because it's so important for us to protect ourselves, for us to protect our energy. And even in talking to this client, I called him out because that's the kind of person I am. As I said, I want to make sure that you're not just enrolling into what everyone around you is saying right now. Because I did say this. I said, we serve 250 clients a month. And I'm probably responsible for at least 50 closed deals a month. So I don't want you to literally be thinking that this doesn't work. So that's a flip side to get to my third point, which is really just being optimistic, being happy. I think you can tell a lot of the advice that I give on how people work leads is happy. It's happy advice. It's not hard negotiating. It's not giving ultimatums. It's not any of the ugly stuff, right? So, and again, if I met someone that could be like, this is the only way to do it, lowball them at first and then do this and then talk them down. Well, I don't have any of those strategies. I say, what's next? And what do we want to buy? And how do we get you focused on what you're going to buy next, right? So my strategies are different. And if you think about them, it's to allow us to keep positive mental momentum. It is extremely hard. Guys, I've been an entrepreneur for 7 years. I wake up at least once a week and tell myself there's no more customers. That's it. Everyone who's ever hired me paid me. There's no one else out there. It's never going to happen again. And I've been doing this for 7 years. And what I'm speaking to is how reasonable it is to feel insecure as an entrepreneur. It's very reasonable. I'm still insecure 7 years in, millions of dollars in sales, right? My whole life has changed, but I'm still insecure. And so that's an even more of a reason to keep that negativity butter away from you. I love that phrase. I'm gonna start using that, to keep that away from you, and then make sure that you're conducting with integrity, and I'll give you one other thing, and you guys can call me about these little tips too. So we had a cold caller that I hired, and integrity is important. If you think you're scamming the seller, then that's the energy you're carrying off. You need more mindset. You're not scamming the seller. You're providing a service and you're helping them move on to something better in their life. Okay, you're not scamming them, right? But if you think you are because you're not clear on the process, because you don't really believe the words you're saying yet, I would clear that up mentally first before continuing forward. And just one little story was, one of my employees called me up and she goes, when we first started, a part of our script was, I buy houses in the area. Have you ever considered selling? We used to say, I buy houses. We don't say that anymore. Who cares? But she called me up and we were in business for 4 weeks when I got this call. We were babies. It was 7 years ago. Nick, I don't feel comfortable saying I buy houses because I don't buy them. And I said, no, I get it. And she's right. The suck it up, buttercup would not be an appropriate reply to her. She's right. She isn't buying houses. So I thought about it and I said, well, would you be okay if you said we buy houses? And she goes, well, yeah, actually, that does make me feel good. So the other piece I would say is make sure you're remaining in integrity. Okay. And if you guys need help with that stuff, you can ask those. Nick, I say this, I feel like I'm scamming them. Call me up. I'll either give you a better way to say it, or I'll explain to you what is really happening so you don't feel that way. So I think, remaining in integrity is also a very big piece, and staying true to who you are, rather than being like, oh, when I show up, I feel like I have to show up like this aggressive person trying to coerce them, right? None of that energy. If that's not your energy, it's not going to work on the long term anyway. So I would watch out for some of that stuff too. That was kind of like a big mindset answer. Did that answer your question though at all for tips and stuff like that? Okay. And Joy, you said you had a question?
Yes, I do. I was gonna ask a question. Actually, I have two, but I'll save the other one for next week. So in talking with trying to secure a seller, we didn't really talk much about finding buyers. I wanted to know if you had any like do's or don'ts with securing buyers. Like, is there anything that you would like say, absolutely don't do this, and really, really, try to do more of this?
Yeah, I think with buyers with land, for me, and I'll let Francisco get a chip at this question too, because I think he's got a lot of experience with that. But for me with buyers, it's very similar to our strategy, right? In my opinion, if it's infill lots, we have two buyers, right? We have builders and we have retail buyers. Okay, for infill lots. That's kind of how I feel for that. Again, I could be wrong, but I'm a big fan of like compartmentalizing. So what I would do is I would make a list of all of the properties like you're going after, and then what would the prospective buyer for those be, right? So for example, infill lots is generally a builder or a retail buyer. That's one or the other. And then let's say large plots of land could be a developer, could be a builder, could be an MLS listing, or it could also be what's called a neighbor campaign. A neighbor campaign is what's often done whenever maybe it's a landlocked piece of land and there's no like legal road access, or if it's in an area where other people in the area might want to absorb that too. Some people that own land want more of it in the same area. So we can do those too. So I wouldn't necessarily say that there's do's and don'ts other than without compartmentalizing, like I mentioned, pursuing the wrong buyer for that piece of land, right? Like I don't know if I'd always necessarily go for a builder if I had a large parcel, or maybe I look for a developer. Maybe I try to sell it on the MLS, and things like that. So I would say, like, think of it as the match game and just make sure that whatever you're hunting for is based off of what you're looking for. That way you don't, for example, I wouldn't want to find 10 developers and then find infill lots, because developers are probably looking for huge lots of land, right? Rather than infill lots. So I think it's more or less like playing the matching game with it. I would say would be the pros. I don't really have any don'ts. I do have a course on how to work with buyers. It's completely free. It's in my online course area. I forget the name of it off the top of my head, but it talks a lot about the relationship, right? And I'll just share this before I let Francisco go at it. But buyers are unique because they have the money, they want to be respected, they want their life to be easier, and I'm a buyer too. So when I meet someone who's extremely organized, it gives me confidence in their deals, and someone who really has their stuff together, so I would think that whenever you're working with a buyer, whenever you get a property under contract, maybe you come up like with a 1-page flyer that's like a PDF or a JPEG, and you send it over to them. And you think about those little nuanced things that we're saying to them, not necessarily what we're saying, but how professional are we showing up while working with them? Because that's going to help you guys to get to get deeper into that relationship with them. Wow, this person means business. You know what? I'm not going to buy this property because that's not a good deal, but I really like the way they work. And I'm going to let them know that, hey, let me know what else you got. So that would be my other tip, is when working with these buyers, is to make sure that we're reminded of all the nuances that could improve our relationship with them as well.
Yeah. And then
Thank you.
and quickly, just to piggyback off your point, I always say this, kind of to what you were saying, the matchmaking thing. I always say that it's easier to manage 5 to 7 solid relationships as opposed to managing 50 transactional relationships. Like if you have a very good communication and dialogue with the builders or the buyers that you do generally work with, they tend to respond faster than someone that you hit up every couple of months saying, "Hey, I got this deal for you," and then nothing comes out of fruition out of that. So that's always my kind of like sweet spot, just making sure, even if the builders that you're working with or buyers that you're working with, even if you don't have anything for them, just check in with them from time to time, and then just be more focused on the relationship more than the transaction, right? Because transactional relationships, I mean, we all have them in our life, and typically the transactional relationships that normally don't necessarily benefit us immediately or consistently, we tend to kind of put that at the bottom of the priority list. So just keep that in mind too. Just build the relationship with the buyers, so that way you always stay on top of mind. And that way, once the relationship is built, you may get a quicker response time from those solid relationships, as opposed to a longer wait time for a response on those transactional relationships.
And
So,
and that even reminds me of friendships, right? I mean, I'm at a point, right? I used to not have a lot of friends, and now I have too many friends. Well, if I'm being honest, there's some people I do not reply to. that I still consider friends. And that's like what Francisco's talking about, right? And it's like, hey, like some people, if I get an invite from one friend, I'm saying yes every time. Let's go, baby, or whatever. We're going to dinner. What's up? Other people, I'm like, yeah, maybe next week. Right. And I'm not saying I don't do this. I'm not like trying to prejudge them, but I realize it's about myself. Wow, I jump at the chance to hang out with this person and I delay at the chance to hang out with this person. Right. And I think that what Francisco is alluding to is creating a relationship where they're jumping at the chance. Right. And then to piggyback what I was saying, showing up professional, organized, and like you really know your stuff helps. I did look up the name of that course that's free is called Dispo Like a Pro. Okay. And I would highly recommend watching that. It's kind of like a little bit more full, a lot of the things we've been talking about, how to respect their time, how to get them to love you, how to make sure that you have a long lasting relationship. Now, not every buyer is a long laster, right? A retail buyer is generally a comer and a goer, some people. So that the other part would be to know who to spend the time on too, right? So not to blanket apply our advice and say, hey, treat everyone like this. But like the ones that are institutional buyers might be a great way to word it, would be the ones that maybe get the priority relationship side.
That was super helpful. Thank you so much.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, these are so fun. Chantel says, is there success in is there success in tax delinquent properties? I'm going to say no. Okay. And what I mean by that is yes. But what I'm saying is to only focus on tax delinquent. So is there success in only tax delinquent properties? And then the answer is no. And what happens is I get a call all the time. Nick, I got this super hot list, Nick. Oh my God, there's 100 people on it. Yeah, I don't give a shit how hot that list is. Okay, 100 people isn't going to do anything for you, right? So when I say that, because tax delinquent lists are often very small lists. Now they're great to throw in to what we're doing, like sprinkle it on top, like sprinkles on top of an ice cream cone, right? Chocolate sprinkles are great. I would not eat a bowl of chocolate sprinkles, okay, for example. And I think that certain of these things like tax delinquent, it's a sprinkle on top, not the main course. So I always recommend, if we're talking about land, I don't think we need to branch over into tax delinquent, because I get so many leads off every landowner. I don't see a need to go into a more distressed list. Right now, houses, that's different. With houses, I split everything up into 2 categories. I just created this the other day. We have absentees, which is my number 1 favorite and where I recommend we start. And then my other list is 3 lists combined. I call that PVT, pre-foreclosures, vacants, and tax delinquents. We combine all 3 of those together for 1 list in very saturated markets. And even though we combine all 3 of those lists together, it's still a very small list. So that's one thing I would just share with you guys. So we have to be careful of going after niches that are too nichey. We'll call them bitchy niches for now, okay? But the ones that are too small to really chisel something out of, if you have like for example, the person that comes to me with 150 records, and then they're like, well, yeah, it actually took me 2 months to get all these 100. So if every 2 months there's only 150 records to work, that's like 1 day of work a month. What are we going to do to grow our business every other day of the month? And I'm not poo-pooing on tax delinquent or super distressed list, but it is an in addition to, not a in replacement of, if that makes sense. Awesome. I love these questions. Like, I've been in business. I have to go. My next calls, but I'll wrap us up with saying this. I've been in business for 7 years, and I'm sure you all of them, I've answered a lot of the same questions over the last 7 years. One thing I love about this group coaching is these are not questions I normally answer. And so it's really great for me to answer them. I feel like I'm learning a lot. You guys are asking great questions. Okay. They're not even repetitive. They're really good. And I think we're doing two things. One, I'm learning a lot by answering these unique questions. I think we're learning a lot by having a discussion. And I just want to let you guys know, I really appreciate you showing up. It really means a lot to me that you're here. If any of you have a super pressing question, which we'll start leading with this, just throw it in the chat. We'll make sure it gets answered first. I'd hate to get through this and miss somebody at the end of the hour. But thank you all so much for joining us today. And I'll see you next Tuesday. See you. Thank you guys.